So that was Illustrator. Now getting into Photoshop, Photoshop isn't necessarily a like what you would call a world-renowned typography management tool. It really is kind of secondary in that regard. Of course, Photoshop is meant to be used for manipulating imagery. However, there are some circumstances where using type-in images is like by far easier in Photoshop than any other program you have access to. For instance, producing effects like I have here. So here, if I break down this image that we have, I'll get rid of that and I just have Stay Young written on the bottom. And one of the cool things about Photoshop is you can take all the pixels that are visible from your selected layer, hit Command on the icon that's next to it, and while you click on that while holding Command, it makes a selection of all the visible pixels that are created from that layer. So for instance, from this type that we created, Stay Young, kind of a corny line that could potentially be put on a t-shirt or something like that. And from there, you're able to create masks. So if I just deselect that selection real quick with Command D, you're going to see that I was able to use that as a mask for not allowing this entire image to come through, just specifically where my text was, kind of creating this cool, there's something hidden going on behind the type and we can only see it through the text. Just an interesting effect that's able to be produced through that. So that's one of the general things. Of course, you also want to definitely be able to take advantage of the effects panel. That's another huge thing that Photoshop is definitely beneficial for, because InDesign and Illustrator just don't give you the full, realistic look of effects that Photoshop does. So here, if I just typed out art, and let's use a little bit of a classier typeface instead of this brush font. I just use Sarah Beck for this example, as I only select the R and the T. Alright, here, let's just grab everything. Go for a totally new one. I think that's a sign. Alright, there we go. Just something completely out of the box. And, of course, you're going to notice here, if I go back to my type tool, again, that's just by hitting T on the keyboard. That's the same in all Adobe programs. You're going to see somewhat similar layout to what we had access to in Illustrator. We have access to all your various typefaces. We have access to your font variations if there are any. With Salam, there isn't. And then you have access to your point sizes. You also have a general kind of breakdown of the paragraphs menu, so your basic alignments, your center, your right, or your left. And then if you wanted to, you could go to Window, and then you're able to get over to Character, Character Styles, Paragraph, and Paragraph Styles. Now, InDesign has a little bit more control, if you ask me, over paragraph styles. However, it is still really useful for being able, if you're making materials that if you end up making changes to, for instance, the body copy in your paragraph, instead of selecting all the circumstances of your body copy, if you had that text assigned to a paragraph style, all you have to do is go in here, change and make the adjustments that you needed to, hit OK, and it's going to do it to every section of type that used the same paragraph style. So it's really good to keep this in the back of your head when you are working with type in larger formats. I really only use this stuff in InDesign because, frankly, I'm not a big fan of making actual printed materials or, really hardly just about anything to do with type in Photoshop, if I have to be honest. It's just not something I find very useful. However, when you're producing effects, it is actually quite helpful. So I just have my art word selected right now. If I go to the effects, for instance, I'm sure you guys recognize most of this. We have access to drop shadows, outer glows, strokes, embossings, all those fun Photoshop effects you can apply to your text. So that was a general coverage of the type tools within Photoshop.